Hello and welcome to another episode of Work 2.0, the podcast. My name is Rachel Wells. As you already know, I'm your host, and this is where we talk all things AI, money, power, and the future of work. Today, I'm joined by Jasmine Escalera. She is a career expert at Zety. Welcome, Jasmine, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. No one's going to hear our private conversation, but we're jumping in already having a great time.
Yes, we are. We totally are. We had a really good chat already about how AI is reshaping work and what you're seeing with your years of experience. You started coaching in what, 2001?
It was a long time ago. It feels like it was ages ago that I started career coaching. And in that time, it was just a different way to think about work. We didn't have things like AI, the pandemic hadn't even happened yet. And so thinking about work and leadership was extremely different than it is now.
Very. I think one thing, and this is the main reason why I'm interviewing you today, Zety released this report about off-the-clock recruiting. And this is so juicy and so fascinating. I really want to get into this because I'm like, I've never seen anything like it. And I feel it offers a lot of potential for people who may have barriers to or just have a mind block when it comes to traditional recruitment, interviewing, job application. ATS is shutting a lot of people out, as we already know.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And then we're having this new growing trend, hopefully, called off-the-clock recruiting. We're seeing in the report, it says 42% of hiring employees or hiring managers are hiring candidates at restaurants,
Hmm.
22% in grocery stores, and 20% in airports. And there are tons of other places as well in social settings like weddings and bars. And so I want to dig into that. Is this the new hiring strategy? What's going on?
I think it's actually not the new hiring strategy. I think we're going back to the way hiring was done even pre-pandemic. So when we think about it, everything has really been starting to happen online, and the pandemic really fast forward that. We've been doing so much in the online space. When it comes to recruiting, there's been a lot of using social media to find candidates, things like LinkedIn. But what we're starting to see is a shift. People don't want to live their life in the online box anymore. We're seeing, especially the younger generation, Gen Z is big on this, and Gen Alpha is predicted to be very big on wanting to be more in real life. Also, what we're seeing is that because AI is being used so much in the recruiting process, not only are hiring managers and recruiters inundated by just the amount of candidates, they're getting candidates who know how to use AI in order to really enhance their skill sets, show more of their experience in the way that it needs to be shown. And so it's becoming a little bit more difficult to just on a flat white sheet of paper really figure out who's the best candidate when all of your candidates are looking really good. So
Yeah,
this is us going back to the way it was, and it's also a more effective solution to get to know someone outside of just the traditional way of recruiting.
I think this is really fascinating. Recently, I wrote a Forbes article about how, ironically, AI is actually slowing down the hiring process because
Yeah.
you get all this AI slop, all these AI generated resumes. So everyone looks, like you said, identical. Everyone looks perfect.
Mhm.
Everyone looks the same. And so hiring managers say the hiring cycle actually takes longer because they're having to fish out what's genuine from what's fake, what's been overly brushed over, and that person really doesn't have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's making hiring cycles longer, and then it's kind of like it's a very like a vicious cycle because then candidates are saying the hiring process is longer, I'm getting ghosted or I'm not hearing back, and well, it's because the AI resumes, they're not helping matters, right? And then also you mentioned Gen Alpha and Gen Z. I'm Gen Z, right? So I just say we are a digital native generation. So to be saying that these generations in particular are more focused on in real life,
Yeah.
when it comes to connection, that's actually quite fascinating, as opposed to everything being online and AI, right?
I think it's just fatigue. We're getting tired of it. And I think Gen Z and especially Gen Alpha, they've always lived in the digital space. They do
Yeah,
have access to so much. And I think it's about connection, that real deal, genuine connection happening more in real life.
absolutely. So just having a bit of fun here. When it comes to this, you said it's not a new hiring strategy. It's something that's been happening for a while, but obviously this report brings it to the forefront. if a hiring manager was to pick an airport, a wedding, a party, or whatever, would it be at the company's expense? Can we
Oh my
expense?
gosh, I love that question so much.
I
That's
mean, if
so good.
I'm going to a wedding, destination wedding in Paris, can I expense it on the company?
Well, see, the thing I hope that it's such an interesting concept because it's almost kind of like, are people going out into the wild, hiring managers and saying, I'm going to find someone here out in the wild? Or is this happening more organically? And, when I think about the report, one of the things that I want for job seekers to understand is you don't have to be on the ready every single second, right?
Right.
These are the reasons why off the clock recruiting is so powerful and so impactful is because it's genuine. It's just happening in the moment. It's happening in the flow. It's allowing for someone to get to know you, not just the accolades and the experience. So we want it to maintain that. So it's interesting. Like, can we actually front this on the company? I guess it's going to have to be after the fact. Maybe not.
Yes.
I don't want anybody to be upfront being like, I'm going to Paris and I'm going to find us our next operations
Yeah.
manager.
Like last year, I love traveling. My grandmother's home country is St. Lucia in the Caribbean. So I love to say that because it's tropical, island, beautiful, white sand beach. I was there like 5 times in like the past like year and a half, and like working as a digital nomad. But there are times when I was at a resort just chilling. I'm thinking like, what if I was finding someone at the resort who would be a good hire? I could expense that and say the $10,000 that I spent at this resort, right?
It would that I love that for you, and also I love St. Lucia. So
Yes.
yes, I'm gonna say as a career expert, sure. Let's
Yeah,
make that a
right. Let's do
thing.
that. So when it comes to social media apps outside of LinkedIn,
Mhm.
LinkedIn we know is obviously the number one business networking platform, but you're saying this report is saying outside of LinkedIn, social media apps are being used to hire as well informally. What are the top social media apps?
Actually, what we found at Zety, we did a previous report on this, and what we found was TikTok was the number one.
Oh,
So that was a surprise to me because
yeah.
every time I go on TikTok, I'm bombarded with a lot of fun things. So I never really thought of it as a recruitment app, but a lot of Gen Z is using TikTok to find opportunities and to find jobs, which is fascinating because it means that companies need to understand that it isn't just about your LinkedIn and website presence anymore. It's
Mhm.
really about what are you doing to amplify your social media presence, even on platforms that you wouldn't necessarily think you would need to be on.
So when you say that, two things come to mind. First off, it just definitely amplifies the importance of ensuring your entire digital footprint is like you say waterproof, right? Airtight, because everyone's focusing on LinkedIn, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, but you just don't know like what you post on your Facebook. Some people post things ill-advisedly on social media.
Yeah.
Employers are watching there too. So either set it to private or just make sure it's something that you'll be proud of, right? Like your digital footprint is across online, not just LinkedIn. But the
Yeah.
other thing you said, when it comes to TikTok, which is quite surprising for me, I'm thinking, is it for specific roles, like maybe if employers are hiring for influencers or marketing jobs, like creative jobs, or is that for other roles as well?
We didn't look specifically at the roles, but I'm going to have to tell you that I think it's across the board. And here's the reason why. On a platform like TikTok, what a company has the capacity to do is really show culture, is really show what they're doing behind the scenes of the day to day work. They can talk more about mission and passion. It's not to say that you can't do that on LinkedIn, but you have more of the capacity to really bring someone into your company and into your organization, which means you have the ability to recruit for any kind of position. So you can be talking about your organization on TikTok, showing the workplace culture, showing how much you care about your employees, and someone who's following your company will want to work there. And so this just really opens us up to, pulling the curtain behind what's actually happening at the company and showing more of who you are and what you stand for.
So let's imagine there's a good proportion, I think it was based on the report, and correct me if I'm wrong, about a third of these interactions happen in retail environments like shopping, right?
Yeah.
Um, let's say I'm at Walmart and I'm a job seeker. Um, how does this work? Like, who strikes the conversation first? Like, walk me through a typical scenario. Do I go up to them and say, hey, my name is Rachel, I'm looking for a job, do you happen to be hiring at your company? How does this work? Who starts the conversation? Is it more natural, or like how does it go?
I think it's much more organic. And, I have to say, Being a career expert with Zety, one of the things that I'm always trying to do is I ask people a lot about what they do for work because I'm really just curious. We're talking about the future of work. You talk about the future of work. It's
Mhm.
important to really understand what are people doing and how are they doing it. And so for me, for example, I love going to coffee shops. And so whenever I see someone on a computer tapping away, whenever I feel like they have that spare moment, hey, nice to meet you. What are you working on there? So it can even start with just organic, natural conversations, being inquisitive. Also, one of the things that we found within the report is people are gravitating towards things like communication, empathy, compassion. They're looking for authenticity. They're looking to get to know you. So just having those natural, engaging conversations and showing your personality is really the way to go. I don't think anyone has to lead with, and this is why this is so special, lead with, I'm looking for a job. Do you have one? It's leading with who you are and just being in the moment.
Right. And I guess that sense of curiosity, like
Yeah.
you're looking for that moment to say, hey, what do you do for work? And it just naturally opens up doors. And my next question, I guess, from that is, when you think about how candidates should prepare for these moments, which again happen organically, they could happen anywhere. It could even be on the street outside your home. You know what I mean? Your neighbor. You just never know, right?
Yeah.
Um, what are your top three tips for how candidates should prepare for these off the clock recruiting moments?
First off, be yourself, be you. That's the whole point of this is that individuals are looking for you and talking to you. They're not actually asking you until probably later on in the conversation, tell me a little bit about how you do this.
Yeah,
That's more for the interview process. And off the clock recruiting is not to take away that interview process and that recruitment process.
right.
It's to
Mhm.
help define good candidates. So be you, be authentic. As you mentioned, be inquisitive. So if you meet someone, ask them what they do, ask them what work looks like for them, what kind of company they work for. So this is almost kind of like the informational interview in the wild. So
Right.
that's something really great to do is be really inquisitive. And I would say the third thing is ask how you can follow up. Because one of the things is you might meet someone out in the wild, you might have a great conversation. They may say, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect for my company. And what you would want to ask is, great, how would I submit my resume? What's the next steps? How do I get in contact with you? And you want
Right.
to make sure that you follow up on that. This is an amazing way to make connections, but you are the one ultimately who has to move that connection forward.
Right. Got it. So it does take a bit of courage, because I guess some people are very shy, even introverted. Do you think introverts could pull this off?
I was actually thinking about that as we were talking because when we were speaking, it seems like you and I have this riff. We're like putting ourselves out there. But what about the introvert? And introverts are great candidates for every single position and they have superpowers beyond measure. And
Yes.
so for an introvert, it is about recognizing that this has to happen either way because networking is something that we want to integrate into every job search. So get comfortable and it's practice, right? Practice with friends, practice with individuals practice in a safe space. But just acknowledging that, hey, I can make that connection anywhere is really powerful and important. And I think, the most important thing about this is again, not degrading the hiring process, but adding to the hiring process.
Right, right. It's kind of, I always tell people, we know about the hidden job market, right? And networking, finding the jobs that are not posted on job boards. And I think this approach is definitely a very useful way to find roles that probably haven't even been advertised yet.
Yes,
Getting your foot in the door,
yes.
uh, and getting that internal referral before it's even put out there. Now you're competing with hundreds of other AI generated candidates, right?
100%. Yeah. And the other thing that we want to be conscious of is there's potentially also a downside to this. And
Okay.
that's something to be thoughtful of. When I first read the report, I was like, wow, this actually, I was pretty shocked at how often it's happening and how much people say these are the right candidates for my positions. Like, we're getting great candidates like this.
Right.
But the one thing that we want to really be conscientious of is potential bias. And also, we want to make sure as well that if you are recruiting for individuals or you're going out into the world really looking for people, that you're doing it in a way where you're doing it in spaces that are equitable. We don't want to we want to make sure that people have access to individuals, and some people don't have access to certain social circles or certain types
Mm,
of places. And so we want to make sure that we're not just hiring people like us, because that's typically what we gravitate towards. And
right.
also that if we are using recruiting practices like this, that we really are being considerate of where we're doing it. We're doing it in spaces where anyone has access to those environments.
You know what? That's a very good point. I think that leads me to just my next point as you were talking about that is it also helps us to kind of open up our own horizon of our own social experience, because if we're thinking about recruiting from the place where we normally frequent, it could be in our neighborhood, but then if we're thinking about being fair and equitable, we could think about traveling somewhere else,
Yeah.
visiting a place not just for work but just for our own enjoyment of life. And one of the things I've learned through traveling is you see the world completely different and a whole
Mm,
lot of breadth to your understanding of what people need, and just sympathy and empathy in your heart when you travel and
yeah.
go to places that you don't usually frequent. And that in turn, of course, improves the hiring process and improves, the caliber of candidates you get in your company. So I think it's a win-win. It benefits you in your own life and your own breadth of thought, but it also benefits the company.
100%, 100%. And that can be done through travel. It can be done through trying new spaces in your own community. The fun thing about this is I as a job candidate could potentially find someone anywhere in my day-to-day that would potentially hire me. And I as a hiring manager could also find someone anywhere in my day-to-day that I could potentially hire. It creates a shift for us where we don't have to be doing everything in the digital space, where we
Yeah.
don't have to be looking on LinkedIn for the right candidates or sifting
Competing
through
with
all the
algorithms.
resumes. It actually means that I can live and also be able to engage with some really cool people that I could potentially work with.
Yeah. And just a final quick question. What about someone who is in a more rural setting? They don't have exposure to, intercity networks. Obviously in city areas or even in suburban areas, there's lots more networking opportunities. There's lots more,
Sure.
you've got cafes, you've got all those sorts of things, retail spaces. If you're in a rural environment, like I live in the country right now, and to go to the local store is quite a walk just to get to the corner store. And it's a beautiful scenery. There's woods and everything, but you're kind of cut off from humanity to some extent. So let's say I'm a job candidate and I work from home, so it's kind of convenient, but I want to, let's say I want to, find these roles out in the wild. How would I do that without literally going into the wild of nature?
It's such a great question. I think there's so much validity to that, right? So, what I would say is take the same concept. So, off the clock recruiting really is about we can find candidates outside of the traditional hiring environment. Well, whatever you like, book clubs, you
Right.
could potentially meet someone in a virtual book club that you are a member of
Mm,
that could potentially have the capacity to hire you or introduce you to someone. So, when we think about networking, what we're basically saying is networking doesn't have to be just done in the professional space.
right.
Networking can be done anywhere because essentially off the clock recruiting is networking. It's just not happening in the professional environment. So what I would say is do what you love and live, and make sure that when you're doing what you love and living, that you're also talking about the greatness of who you are, what you do, what you love. Be expressive, have fun. And
Mm.
anyone is going to gravitate towards that no matter what, whether it be for personal or professional relationships.
You're right. You're right. There's a theme that keeps coming up in my recent podcast interviews with the guests before you were talking about just before we got on here. My interview with Dr. Ben Goertzel, the father of AGI, and there's a theme that keeps coming up, and that's basically humanity. Being human is like you're literally that's your unique selling point.
Yes, absolutely. There is nothing that's going to take that away. No AI, no machine, no nothing. We are all
Yes.
humans and we have a way to be able to connect with each other that is very different. And I think for a little bit of time, just because of the necessity of the world, we all went into the digital space and maybe lost a little bit of that. And what I love about off the clock recruiting is it kind of brings us back into this idea of I can actually be anywhere and my next great thing could be right in front of me. And I think a lot about that when it comes to partnership too.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. We could talk for ages, but we're not going to do that. We will definitely connect offline. Anyway, thank you so much for being on this episode. Thank
Absolutely.
you for tuning in to our guests. I'm getting tongue twisted. For our listeners tuning in. For those of you who've enjoyed watching and listening to this episode, it was quite a fun episode, as you could tell. Feel free to leave any questions you have in the comments, wherever you've seen this, on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever you've seen it. Leave your questions and I will direct them to Jasmine. Also, definitely share this episode with your co-workers, with a friend or family member who needs it. And don't forget to rate Work 2.0, the podcast, so we can get out there more and share the good news about what's happening in the world of work and what you can do about it to prepare yourself with more people. All right, I will see you in next week's episode of Work 2.0, the podcast.